Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Night Vision. And if this is your first time here, I want to give you a special welcome, and I hope you'll come back again. I'm excited about the show and my guest and the subject matter tonight. And I have to admit, it's sort of a guilty pleasure because this is something that I personally really wanted to hear all about. I was told by a friend of mine. In fact, I want to thank Gene Canale for recommending this subject matter to me and by extension, introducing me to tonight's guest, because tonight we have with us Gail Lynn, and she is the inventor of the harmonic egg, and we're going to tell you all about what that is right now. Hi, Gail.
Hi. I love your introduction. It's so dynamic and fun.
It is. As I was saying, a friend of mine, Jean, a lady that I just spent some time in southern France on a group sort of a tour, but we were giving also a memorial there. And she was telling me about this egg, and that she and her husband in particular visit the egg that's located, I think, in Baltimore. And
In Maryland.
that they go, and I don't know whether you call it treatment or whether you call it sessions or what it is, but they go and they get their harmonic egg sessions and they swear by it. And so I said, what are you talking about? And so next thing I know, I'm getting a call, and it's this wonderful lady who's an engineer from Detroit, a very unlikely inventor, I would think, or at least not you personally, but you don't normally think of a Detroit engineer coming up with this really, what I would call out of the box type thinking and type of inventing of technology. But you also tell me that, first of all, maybe we better back up, and can you just explain what is the harmonic egg, and we'll also display a picture of it so that people will know what we're talking about.
Okay, so the harmonic egg is a immersive experience of sound and light. And I believe that we are sound and light beings from God, from source. So we should be healing with sound and light. And so the egg shape is about life. I used sacred geometry. And when people say, oh, Gail Lynn, the inventor, I have to laugh because I don't feel like I'm the inventor. It felt like it was downloaded information from other lifetimes that I've spent in Atlantis, Lemuria, Sirius B. And so it's been really interesting when people say, you're the inventor. I look around and say, oh, yeah, I guess that's the word that we use on this 3D Earth plane. But really, it was just information out there to bring through.
That's funny. But you say it's downloaded information, and you say that with all confidence, that, this is downloading information. It comes from my time in other places and in other times. And how do you know that? What do you have memories?
I do have memories of Atlantis and the fall of Atlantis. And a lot of people that I'm friends with in this lifetime remember the same situation. it was an abuse of power. There were so many things going on. And then there was the divine feminine. And so we're in the age of Aquarius now, and this has been building. As we all know, there's been something building. There's something that's going to change. And so as this has built up, I remember my mentor in this lifetime, he and I were in Atlantis together, and we made a pact. We made a soul contract that in this lifetime on Earth, he would turn that technology over to the divine feminine, because he was directly related to the fall of Atlantis. So his penance, if you will, was to bring it through and turn it over to the divine feminine. And we met back up in this lifetime. And his was more of a box. And I knew that it needed to be the shape of an egg. It had to be 360 degrees of healing. It had to be an immersive experience, whereas we can heal with sound and light, because we are sound and light beings from nature. So it, to me, when I look at this, it connects you to your divine source, your divine self, your higher self. And so I look at people walking around on the planet now, and because the egg clears the veil of the illusion of our reality. So I start to see things, and I don't understand why other people can't see what I'm seeing. And I realize that veil's lifted. I realize that I have a whole different consciousness going on. And I spend most of my time in love and gratitude. And I'm not perfect, absolutely not perfect. I'm still having a human experience. But when you spend time in love and gratitude, and you've had other guests on your show that have spoken about this, everything flows. You can manifest. And so when this came through, it was a very odd situation. And I started seeing pieces of the puzzle, and I started being able to draw it. And I remember being born. And when I was born, there was something above in the ceiling at the hospital that rubbed their hands together, kind of in excitement, and said, "She's here." And I didn't understand what that meant until this came through. And then I look back and say, okay, I had the engineering background. I have an international business background. I have a Hollywood background. How fun that the universe would put me in this situation and put all these pieces of the puzzle together, meet the right people. I believe that there's so much divine intervention. So when these pieces started coming together, I had the CAD and drafting background to just draw it, to show somebody, this is what I want to build. This is what we need. And the 360 degrees of healing and the sacred geometry and the egg, in the form of the egg, is about life. And so this all came together so easily for me. The hard part's been getting the humans together to build them and to, create a business around it. But I created a divine feminine business model where it's about cooperation and not competition. So I think this is the new business model of the future, where we're going to start to see more love, more gratitude, more community, more integrity, and cooperation with each other. We're all in this together. None of us are getting out alive. And so we should just stop living in hate and be more united versus divided.
I couldn't agree with that more. I often wonder, I agree with you that it does appear that we are headed for something, that something is coming, that, changes are imminent. And it definitely seems to have something or everything to do with the sort of return of the divine feminine, because there was a time when the feminine was honored, and for at least a couple thousand years, we've kind of been relegated to the back seat of the car, while the male energy's been driving everything, business and all that. So I understand that the last time we're coming toward another sort of, I guess it's astrological configuration, where the last time we were there, it was the time period of the divine feminine, and that we are headed toward that again. But yet we see so much rancor and division and crime and hatred and everything else out there. It seems to be at a fever pitch right now. But it makes me wonder whether or not that is just the resistance and sort of the last throes of the old way of being, that we're now moving, into something different. And people are always resistant to change, even change for the better. So is that what we're feeling right now with all this craziness and people yelling at each other and everything else? Is it sort of the...
I believe so. I believe there's an energy that's coming. And so Bruce Lipton says this. He says, when you're trying to get from here to here, what's in between is chaos. And so we're in the chaos right now because we're trying to get to that other side. I want to go back to something you said about the masculine energy, because I do believe that women probably abuse their power. And we go through this cycle where history repeats itself. Now men have abused their power. So now we're cycling back to the feminine getting back into power. So hopefully that we can find that balance, and no male or female will abuse their power, and that we can be together and united and take our power back, because we're magical beings from source, from God. And we don't really realize how much power we have, because we're controlled by fear and chaos and division. And so there's so many things that I believe history is going to repeat itself. The planets are aligned in a certain way. And if you listen to astrologer Pam Gregory, I love how she does the research and says, when the planets were aligned at this time, in the 1700s, there were governments that were falling. Truth was being revealed. And she said, this is how the planets are aligned again. And so I love that research that she does to go back and say it. She's just not making stuff up and pulling it out of the air.
Right.
She's literally saying, this is how the planets are aligning again. This is what happened the last time the planets were aligned like this.
Wow. And what does she, can you expand on that a little bit about how does she see this sort of evolving or playing out? Like, what is it going to look like?
So what she's seeing is more sovereignty. She's seeing that these planets are now aligning. So government structures are going to break down. We're going to start to see truths that were hidden from us before, because it's time to see that truth. And then we're going to have that more sovereignty. There's going to be more people that are taking their power back, and we're not under a control of a minority percentage of people, just for them to climb their way to the top and climb on our backs.
Yeah. That seems to be sort of how the world works at the moment, or has worked the recent past. So hopefully that would be a good change. And yeah, I do say, talk about divine feminine, and, and really excited about, having the return of that energy. But by no means, am I saying anything negative about the male energy. I think the problem is when either one of those is out of balance. If we only have one, then it's not going to be a good thing. And it would be the same thing if it was women, being their power and powerful. Now, do you have any idea, memory or information on how that might have come down, how women would have abused their power? I mean, we're kind of familiar with men being in power. We know what powers they've abused. It's, men are, warlike and aggressive and this kind of thing. And so I would imagine that's the kind of power they would abuse. But what is it that women now, I guess if I were to imagine, I would say, were we like very cunning? Were we sneaky? Because women are very clever and, intuitive and all that. Is that what we abused?
I think we were. I think we were. I think we were very manipulative. I think we were very cunning. I think we were very entitled to have the male serve us. And I think you're exactly right. We need to find that balance, because then they rebelled. And so then they took over, and now we're rebelling. And so we need to find that place where we stop making the same mistakes we've made in history and find that balance where we can support each other, because it's the yin and the yang. It's the balance.
Yeah.
I love my boyfriend. He's very masculine, but I'm sometimes very airy-fairy. Even though I have the engineering background, he has to pull my helium balloon down and ground me. And so he has 22 years experience in the Navy, and he's very retired as Chief Petty Officer from the United States Navy.
He's like a military guy.
Yeah. And so we
great.
clash to the nth degree, but we found a place where we can love and support each other for our differences. We don't agree on probably 90%, which is amazing that we're still together. So the other day he says to me, well, actually I started this fight. We're talking about taxes. And I said, do you realize we pay taxes on our income, and then we pay taxes on our property that we already paid with taxed money. And I just went that rabbit hole of, we're paying taxes on tax money that we paid taxes on already, and we're taxing it again and again and again. And he doesn't see it because he believes that the government would never do anything to harm us. And I said, you're just brainwashed. And he said, you know what, you're brainwashed by your granola friends. And I got very insulted, and my feelings got hurt. And I thought, oh, I started this fight. So later on in the day, I said, you hurt my feelings, but I started it. I hurt your feelings first. I said, no, you didn't hurt my feelings. He said, I'm molded by what I've been taught, what I listen to, what I watch, what I read. And you're molded by what you have been taught, where you grew up, what you read, who you listen to. And so, and it brought us actually closer together, because we recognize that we love each other at a heart level, at a soul level. But that ego mind, that brain, this human form, it gets very confused and it gets very insulted. And the emotions that we have to go through as a human species are quite comical.
That is funny. Your granola friends. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. But it is interesting that your partner be some military guy, retired military. But it's also interesting that you're an engineer, and you must live in both sides of your brain all the time.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Together.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing and a curse. And I do find it comical that he's an engineer as well. But I've had some of my psychic friends and my palm reader friends, they would look at his palm and they say, you know what, Gail, he's a starseed. And you both met when you were on a spaceship together. You were a master geneticist. He said, I was flying these egg-shaped ships and I would blow up every time. He said, but if you could find one cell of my being, you could put me back together. And he said, and your boyfriend, his name is Bill, he said Bill was on the ship and he always admired you from afar, but he was always embarrassed or he couldn't quite, approach you. But he said, if you were on a ship, you wanted Bill on the ship because he could fix anything. So fast forward to this lifetime, he was on Navy ships and they sent him all over the world because he was the one that would be able to fix ships that no one else could fix. And I said, babe, Do you not remember these previous lifetimes? He's like, no. You're here, you go in the ground when you're done, and then that's it. There's nothing else. And I just know, because I can feel energetically who he was, who he has been, and who he is to me. And so it's just really cute to have that experience with him.
Yeah, you can imagine, being in the business that I've been in for many years, working in television and then doing this show and other things. I've run into a lot of people who have a lot of abilities and who have a lot of memories, and some people, I grew to be really good friends with. I had a woman who unfortunately passed away about 3 years ago, but she was one of my very closest friends, and she experienced all kinds of things and was intuitive about all kinds of things. And while I've had intuitive experiences in my life, and they're kind of isolated, and I kind of name them all to you, like, oh, I remember when I knew this and then it came true and blah, blah, blah. But she lived in that world. But she, like you, also had, occupied the other side of her brain too. And she was very grounded in a lot of ways and worked in the legal field and was good at it, so it's like she worked both sides. And she would tell me things, and, things would just come up in conversation. And I know to my bones that she was not lying. I know she was telling the truth. I would stake my life on it. I would, put everything I have on the fact that she was an honest person. But not having experienced it personally, there's something that just kind of doesn't allow you to quite give yourself over to, like, oh, wow, that really happened. Because if it only happens to other people, it's difficult. And so when you talk about having these memories and all that, I totally believe that you're telling me the truth. But yet, could that really be real? Oh my gosh, it's like, and I so want something just to manifest right in front of me, or come up and knock me in the head with, a bataka or something. It says, yes, it's real. Get it, get it, get it. But it's like, I think most people have a hard time because they just, it just doesn't happen for them that way. Now, is that because some people are just born with that particular gift of memory and remembering their past and maybe other lives? Or is that something we could develop, that each one of us could develop and increase or enhance whatever experiences we're personally having?
I think we all have the ability, and we're born with it. But, people are told, oh, I think you interviewed somebody, Arthur, recently. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was another podcast. And, yeah. And people will say, oh, you're crazy, or don't do that, because it scares people, but yet they have it. And maybe it scares people because they know they have it, and they don't want to bring it forward. I think when you're quiet in your mind, most people have these downloads when they're in the shower, or you're on autopilot driving, or you're just waking up in that hypnagogic state. But you get on with your day and you have all these things in your mind. I got to do laundry. I got to unload the dishwasher. I have to cook dinner. I have to make sure I have lunch. You don't get those downloads. But I think that clairsentience over the years, I've realized that I have to listen to it. and I was born a Scorpio, so people say that has something to do with a stellium in Scorpio. My birth chart is crazy. People have said that I work for the Ascended Masters. That's what my birth chart says. I don't know. All I know is that when I listen, when I pay attention, things they just work, and I manifest. I worked in telecommunications for a vice president of the technology division, and I was his project manager. And he literally had on his status report, the one column was Gail's intuition. He put that on the status report that he gave up to the president. And they had asked him, they said, what do you mean Gail's intuition? He's like, she's always right. If she says this project's going to go over budget and it's going to be delayed, she's always right. So he puts green, yellow, red status, and he'd put a column Gail's intuition. And I thought it was silly. I was in my 20s at the time, but I always have been able to go somewhere and a book will pop off the shelf. I can open it up to the page and anybody can relate to that, right? So we all have the ability.
Yeah, I do find
it's a muscle.
Things just sort of come at me, and it'll be just the right thing at the right time. So I guess we all do. And I have had those moments where, I've just kind of known something. And the other thing is, it's like the energetic flow of things. I know that I can feel when something is like bumping up against, something else, getting resistance. And then conversely, you can feel when it's like, woo, smooth sailing, it's the right thing at the right time. And because it's just going, and then things are popping up a long way to sort of almost push it along, and also to let you know, yep, you're on the right pathway. And it's really funny. And I want to see if you can relate to this or if you agree with this. Recently, actually a few years ago, pre-COVID, I wanted to buy a house in France. And at the time, I actually had the money to buy it. And I was looking at this house, and my friends were all push, get it, because I have a lot of friends over there too. And there was something that just would not let me make that move. Okay, then had the pandemic. Nobody was working for 2 years. I had, a house full. I was the only person that had an income at the time. And so basically for 2 years, the whole family lived on, my house money. And so it was, it was basically depleted. And everybody was, oh, you should have bought that house and I'm not saying it's because I knew something was coming and I was going to need the money. I just didn't feel like it was the right time, to make that move, to make that decision. And I knew that at some point I would want to do that, but there was something holding me back from doing it. I just couldn't move forward. And my friends would all, oh, you're never going to buy, you're never going to do that. You're just, talking and blah, blah, blah. Well, here we are a few years later, and somehow I don't even know how I came across this house. I, was looking at places, no money, but looking at places, and I found this property that would be a perfect location for what I want to do, because I want a house that has, someplace where I can stay or live. And also I want a business, and I want to put a center, sort of a research and, wellness center, just sort of feed the mind and the body and everything else. And so this was a perfect location. The property is like super, super cheap, needs to be renovated, but it's not going to cost that much. Luckily, the people came in my path that can do all the work and are super honest and super economical. And so, even though, I had no money, I knew this was what I wanted to do. I knew this is the right thing. And so things just started falling into place. I had friends stepping in and saying, "Oh, I'll give you some money," and this, that, and the other. And I started figuring out, I could take this money from that and I could cobble it together and I could, so everyone was in shock because they thought I would never do it. They thought I would never pull the trigger on the deal. And I said, "No, you don't understand. It wasn't the right time. Now it is, And so it's like you can feel sort of when you're on the right road, because your favorite saying, let it flow, because it's flowing. And when it's flowing, you can feel it. And you say, okay.
100%. We had talked about that earlier too, before we started recording, is, let it flow or let it go. And I say that so often, and it's hard for me. I mean, I want to make things happen. I used to have Successories. There was this motivational company called Successories that's probably still out there. And there was something I had on my desk, and it says, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. And I was the make things happen person. I was making things happen, but guess what? That resulted in 2 divorces because I, forced this into something that really should have never been. And so it resulted in 2 divorces. And I look at one of my mentors. This is where Let It Flow came from for me. I was sitting at a conference one time, sitting next to one of my mentors who was a speaker there. And he could tell I was just antsy. I was like, is this over yet? I'm bored. What's next? And he passed a note to me, and it said LIFE. Let it flow effortlessly. Wow. And I made a bracelet out of it that had life, let it flow effortlessly. And I thought that was just so profound.
Wow. That is. I have a good friend over in France that's a jewelry maker. I think I'm going to have her make a bracelet for me.
Yeah. That's really cool. And actually, let me tell you the story about the bracelet that I have on. I have a bracelet that I have on right now. And most of your podcasts are just audio, so I'll describe it. It's kind of a brass looking bracelet. It's got this really weird sparkly stone as a square in the middle. And then there's 2 lines on the sides of it. This showed up when I had my center and I was helping people, use the harmonic egg. And one day it showed up on the table in the room. And we do, you said at the beginning, do a calm treatments or sessions. We call them sessions. Somebody had their session and it showed up on the table afterwards. And I always clean the room afterwards, and I saw the bracelet. So I called her up and she said, "That's not my bracelet." I said, "What do you mean it's not your bracelet? You were the last one in the room." She said, "It's not my bracelet." So then I think, did I not clean the room before the last lady? So I called her up. She said, "That's not my bracelet." And I thought, it really looks to me Egyptian. I have a lot of roots in Egypt. And I feel like it was left there for me by someone, somewhere. And it was no one's bracelet. It ended up being my bracelet. But how weird is that? These are the things that we have to pay attention to. There's always signs. Like you said, it wasn't time for you to buy that property, but you're seeing the signs now. And there's always a sign if we're paying attention.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been the right place. And at the time, I loved it. It was a great place, much nicer than the place I've ended up buying, but it will be nicer. But it just wasn't for me to do at that particular time.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been able to take care of the family.
Yeah. And I did have a ring one time up here that same way. I was in a rush. I was getting ready to go to the airport, and flying to Europe. I was working on a documentary, we were in pre-production doing research. And my daughter had passed away just, I think, 4 months before that. So I was still very raw and all that. And so as I was getting ready to leave, I thought, oh, I'm going to wear her ring. And then, it would make me feel, got something from her with me. And then I said, oh my gosh, her fingers were a little bit bigger than mine. What if I lose this ring? I would be so dejected because I wanted to save it for her daughter. And I thought, no, I'm not going to take a chance. I'm not going to wear that ring. So as I decided that, I was walking out of the bedroom and into the living room, and I passed by a little round table, like a table for two, sitting there. And I heard something hit the table. And I turned around, and there was a pink wrapping paper, a pink wrapped ring box. And I opened it up, and there was a little diamond ring in it. I had just had the experience with her big diamonds, but this was a small diamond ring, which, if anybody knows me, they know I don't wear big honking rings. I like small, delicate things. And so it was a small little diamond ring. And I was like, what the heck? There was nowhere it could have come from. I looked, it was just, the filling, and it was just very, very weird. And I always wondered if, my daughter was sending me a ring, because I was afraid to wear hers. And she goes, here's a ring, Mom, for you to wear. But things like
I think
that.
that's a beautiful story. Yeah.
But my problem is that I talk myself out of things, like something will happen, and then I'll just go, that was just a coincidence. That wasn't really anything. So I think maybe I'm not the only one that has experiences and then downplays them or rationalizes them.
I do the same thing. I had a center owner the other day, and she was crying on the phone, and she said, I can't find a space. My egg is here, and it's just not working for me, and things aren't flowing, and it's not happening. And she was crying. I said, let me do a remote session on you. Let us hold the intention that you're worthy, because she felt so unworthy. And I said, let's hold the space that, because she's going to have a baby. And she said, what do I do? And I said, you can take the baby to work with you. And then your tribe is going to be mothers that come in with their babies, and you're going to be great. And you're going to be such a good center owner. And so it started to clear that, unworthiness. And so she had been looking, and places were falling through. We did one remote session. She said minutes after the session ended, she got an email. A space was available. It's a block from her house. Now, as my engineering mind, I said, oh, well, that was going to happen for her anyway. It's just a coincidence. Yeah. It wasn't because of the egg. It was because it was going to happen anyway. And it just so happened that there's way too many coincidences. And you just have to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that's really interesting because, you can actually do remote sessions. I would imagine the total immersion in the egg and all that would, is the optimum experience. But how does it work remotely?
So what my guides showed me, they said, you can put in somebody remotely, their picture is their energy. Just like we send people prayer and they get well, it's all energy. So when we set that intention, we're saying, okay, this person's energy. And what they told me to get was their full birth name with their birth date to put underneath their picture, because that's when they were perfect. That's when the cells were perfect. That's when they just dropped onto the planet, that full birth name and that birth date. That's when they chose to land, where they chose to land. We don't need the location or the time, but then we put their picture in there and it's all energy. And then when two or more are gathered, we know things are more powerful. So it's me or the practitioner holding the intention, and they're holding the intention for what they want to achieve in that session. It's really powerful. And I'm also noticing that the eggs are connected by some earth matrix. And so I will do remote sessions with the Peru egg, because I want to really tune into the energy of Pachamama. And in the Peruvian energy, that egg is very powerful. I've done sessions in the New Zealand egg and connected with nature here at my house with the trees. In New Zealand, they just, they revere the trees and nature. And so you feel the energy from the land on which the eggs are sitting on. So I tell people, find a piece of land or a place that you always wanted to go to. If there's an egg there, do a session in that egg and you'll absorb the energy of the land there too. It's so beautiful.
Wow. That is amazing. Now, so you say, you can do a session using the energy of probably any one of the eggs located anywhere. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And now you did say that it's
just focus.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
How does that work? Like, do you just tune in, or do you notify the Peruvian egg people that you're going to be?
Oh yeah, then you set up an appointment, right? You set up an appointment and then they put you into the egg at that moment in time when you're resting. You're not going to be on the computer or driving or watching TV. We want you to either meditate or draw or color or take a walk in nature, so that you're tuned in when that energy is going on in your field, on your body with your picture, that you're really spending the time in nature or resting, so you can really absorb that energy. Very often we have people who will find that we open the doors and their picture is in there. Now, again, my engineering mind can't always grok this, but I'll open up the door and there'll be a smell. And I'm like, how is their picture smelling? It's as if energetically they are in there.
That is wild.
It's wild, crazy stuff that I thought I would never be able to understand where I came from and where I am now. It just really has opened up my eyes to anything is possible. And, like you said, the experience of being in the egg is like nothing else. Being in there, being surrounded by the wood inside and the music immersing you, and you're just, it's just so nice to be in there by yourself. But I do have clients that say, it's just too stressful for me to drive an hour in traffic. And then after I have this beautiful egg session, I have to drive back home an hour in traffic. And so it's for them, they like the remote sessions that they can just stay at their home, lay on their yoga mat or on their couch and just absorb the energy. And many people, including my brother, who doesn't believe in any of this stuff, he said, I'm going to ask you a question. He said, and I don't want to tell you what I found, but he said, what colors did you use in my session? And I told him, I think yellow and blue. He's like, that's crazy, because I saw bright yellow. And he doesn't believe in this stuff. But he connected with the egg 1,200 miles away when I did a remote session, and he picked up and felt the color that was used.
Was he doing a session for a particular reason?
Mm-hmm. Or he had a flu. Yeah, he had a cold, and I just told him, let me build your immune system. Let's both set the intention that you're going to get well quick. Your immune system's going to recover from this. Everything's going to, and the next day he said, my gosh, my sore throat was gone. My stuffiness was gone. I was feeling better the next day. But yet he works as, he repairs robots on the line for Ford Motor Company. He's been working for Ford Motor Company for 31 years. And so it's not in his mindset to understand this type of energy. He said, I don't know what it is, but it works.
Yeah. Yeah. That is amazing. So the sessions are generally around the same price. I understand you have a standard price, and you can go in person to any one of a number of locations in the United States. Quite a lot of locations, and then I know that you're also in the UK, in Belgium, in Switzerland, and some other places in Europe. So, but also
Correct.
you can do a remote session, which is effective as well and cost a bit less. So either way you want to do it. I mean, I like the idea of the remote session because I understand exactly what that woman was saying about it's, you can just do it in a peaceful way. You don't have to hassle with traffic and all that. But is there a difference in the efficacy of doing it remote or doing it in person? It would seem like you get a bigger dose if you're there in person.
I like the in-person sessions. Inside, I have an egg in my house, and I like that better than the remote sessions because I feel like I'm really connecting and I'm listening to my body. I'm feeling my pulse. I'm hearing my heartbeat, and I'm spending that time in silence at the end. That is just in this beautiful egg shape. You're surrounded by wood. So I just think that it's like forest bathing inside there. So, I kind of can cheat if I'm doing a remote session and I'll say, well, let me just check my phone here really quick. This is how our brains work. But when you're enclosed inside
Oh,
the egg, you're not trapped in there. So don't there's claustrophobia, people. Don't get freaking out now on us. But the door's closed. There's a doorbell in there. You can push the door open on your own. But when you're in there and you're having a session, there's nothing else you can do but be with yourself. And in that silence that it's 40 minutes of music and 10 minutes of silence at the end. And I feel like that is where the magic happens, the integration happens. But, including myself, I can just cheat a little bit and say, well, it's been, 8 minutes of silence. I'm just going to go start doing something else now. But when I'm in there and I've got a timer set, I think it's just a way better experience. But for those that don't have access to a harmonic egg, or maybe it's 4 or 5 hours away or a plane ride away, remote sessions are lovely.
oh, yeah. And it sounds like from, what your brother said, they definitely are effective. And I know, that it's difficult to talk about, some of the results and some of, I know there's, regulatory issues in the United States, especially. But you have had some great testimonials from people. It's not what you're saying about it, it's what the people that actually used it are saying about it. And I was reading about the positive effect that some people were saying that it had on certain conditions and, some very serious things that I don't know how much we can get into any kind of like healing properties or wellness properties or anything like that of the egg. But can you talk about what some of the people have told you that they experienced?
Certainly. And just like your guest that you had on your show, Cary Grant, Dr. Cary Grant, there's excuse me, there's physical healing and there's spiritual healing. So there's, and I think that our words, we say, oh, my migraines or my cancer or my something, we give it an address and we give it a nice cushy home to live in. So we have to be cognizant of our words as well. But we know that our bodies, as Dr. Cary said, have an innate ability to heal. And when we're in the right environment of peace and calm, our bodies can heal naturally. So it's not the healer that's healing you, it's you, your body healing you when you can get your mindset in a good place. So one particular story that I can tell is a client that has a pacemaker. When he lost the love of his life, 27 years he was married, she unexpectedly died in her 50s, and he had a heart attack, and 40% of his heart died. And he, got the pacemaker, and he had done sessions for quite a long time, probably for a couple, many months, maybe 6 or 8, 9 months. And he would just come in once a month and do a session. Well, I had a medical doctor in the center the same time he was there, and he said he was going to go get his pacemaker battery replaced. And the doctor said, well, why don't you give Gail your ejection fraction number and your cardiac output number? And I can tell you, how much of your heart is still dead, because he said, 40% of my heart died. And so we got those numbers, showed them to the doctor, and he said, this is crazy. This is a fully functioning heart. So we know that the body can regenerate. We know the body can heal. And a lot of times it's just emotional. Maybe he was able to clear that sadness and his heart regenerated. We know that the liver stores the anger, kidneys store fear, the lungs store grief. So a lot of times clients would come in and say to me, oh, I have all this, pain in my right side underneath my rib cage where this is where the liver is. And I said, what are you so angry about? And they think I'm psychic, right? It's like, I'm not psychic. I just know where you're holding anger.
Wow.
Or my dad passed away from lung problems. My dad held a lot of grief. He didn't believe in any of this stuff, and he held all of his emotions in. And he passed away from they called it COPD, but he died of lung cancer. It was a misdiagnosis. And so we have a lot of clients that come in and they release these emotions. I had one lady come in. She had severe knee pain. And she came out and she was crying uncontrollably. And she was probably in her late 50s. And what happened? She goes, I remember that my mom told me that I was a disappointment to God when I was really young. And she said, I relived that whole thing when she was 5 years old. So what, 50 some years of holding on to this? As soon as she let that go, gave herself, the knee pain went away. So I have story after story after story of people who experienced a release of emotion, and then the physical body can heal. So it tells me a lot.
Yes. What about addictions? Have people experienced any help?
It's a tough one, because if you don't want healing for yourself more than somebody else wants healing for you, it's not going to work. But what I'm finding is that we have tones in our voice, and so we can be missing a tone in our voice. So say the key of G or the tone of G, and we're finding a lot of people who are addicted are missing a tone or two. They can replenish those tones with a pitch pipe or music that's recorded in the tone of G or the tone of E, or they can get musical instruments with these tones, and then they can replenish these tones. And we're finding that a lot of people have physical ailments, and they're also missing a tone that's related to that. And we're seeing people starting to talk about this online now. You're missing the tone of E, you could have lung problems, but that's in the physical body. And then there's the spiritual body. So you gotta, there's so many factors. People go, oh, I'm just gonna get this MP3 player and I'm gonna listen to MP3 files with the tone of E. But you're not getting the true expression of the music when you're compressing it onto an MP3 file. So there's so many layers of these.
So how do you? I know you have special music for the eggs, and so how? Oh, so I guess you managed to record it in a way that's uncompressed. Is that?
It's a WAV file. Yeah, it's what some people are calling now analog. It's a WAV file. So you'll find that it's 700 megabytes of a file versus, say, 5 megabytes of an MP3 file. Yeah. It's huge. It's a huge difference in the quality of the music. Huge. And so I would encourage anybody to, I think even Neil Young is writing, I think he wrote a book about how, the MP3 files and these compressed files have really altered the music industry. And Steve Jobs didn't do us any favors by letting us put 1,000 songs on an iPod, because they're not good quality songs. They're compressed, they're cold, they're clinical. and they're just not the expression of the musician's talent.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's interesting. Neil Young. Now I know you've written a book, and we're getting right down to the wire, so I didn't want to run out of time before we give people an opportunity to have a look. It's called Unlocking the Ancient Secrets to Healing by Gail Lynn. And I can't read the second line because I'm half blind.
It's just how science is looking to the past for the future. Yeah, it's how science is looking to the past for the future of medicine, just like ancient technologies are coming back. Sound and light therapy is coming back. So it's just that science is looking to the past now for the future of medicine. And the future of medicine is now. We're in the future of medicine. So yeah, and I give a lot of information about the different chakras and different instruments that bring the chakras back into balance. And then I give 90 references of how the efficacy of sound and light therapy and how it works. And you can't just really dispute it after you still can after you read the book. You can't really dispute it, but yeah, you can if you really want to.
That is great. Now, I hope you'll come back again sometime and share some more stories and experiences with the egg. And I would recommend that people get your book and get more information. Now, do you share any personal information in the book about sort of how you came to this?
I do. I share. I'm very vulnerable in the book. I wanted to put anonymous on it because I was just really vulnerable and I didn't want to be judged. But my ghostwriter said, no, people need to know who you are and who brought this through. And that, you're, a good soul and that your energy's in the egg and they need to know who you are. But yeah, I was very vulnerable in the book, and I talk about, some of my divorces and some of my challenges, but it's also relatable because people then can say, oh my gosh, because I get these stories all the time. I can so relate to the things that you went through and when you lost your dog and this happened and this divorce happened. So it made me real for people. So it was really lovely and it was a cathartic experience.
That is wonderful. Well, I can't wait to read it, and I can't wait to have my egg experience. I'm going to call you. All right. Thank you so much, Gail Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you.
We love it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will see you next week.